Nova Scotia Community College, English for Academic Purposes. Catherine McLean, EAP faculty. Today's lesson is on conditionals. In today's lesson, we're going to discuss the third conditional. In the third conditional, which is again a conditional sentence used very frequently in the English language. Like all conditionals, the third conditional has two clauses, an if clause and a result clause. In the if clause, the verb is used in past perfect tense, and in the result clause, there are several ways to finish it off. Typically, we use the expression would have plus the past participle form of the verb, so PP. Also possible, we can use could have, may have, might have, and should have, plus PP. Let's look at some examples. If the teacher had given more homework, the students would have been overwhelmed. So, would have been. So, past perfect in the if clause, would have plus PP in the result clause. Another example, if the teacher had given more homework, the students might have protested very loudly. Another example, if you had followed the directions carefully, you shouldn't have gotten lost. You can see from these examples that the third conditional is used to describe an imaginary situation. For the most part, you are expecting that, or you're describing a situation that is different from the reality of what actually happened. I'll say that again. It's a description of a situation that is different from what actually happened. It is pretty much always imaginary. Okay, so if we go back to example 1 and we look at if the teacher had given more homework, the students would have been overwhelmed. But the fact is that the teacher didn't give more homework. So what we're doing is imagining what might have happened if she had done that, but she didn't. Let's look at example 2. If it, or the weather, if it had rained yesterday, I would not have gone out. I would not have gone out. So would have, or in this case would not have, plus PP. I would not have gone out. If it had rained yesterday, he would have worn rain boots, because that would make sense, wouldn't it? He would have worn rain boots. If it had rained yesterday, we could have gotten very wet. We might have gotten very wet. Any of those things would have been possible, but it did not rain yesterday. So we're just imagining what might have happened. Okay, let's look at example 3. If you had arrived on time for your interview, like you were expected to do, you would not have had the problem you have now. If you had arrived on time for your interview, he might not have been upset with you. So again, might, have, and past participle, with of course a negative here. If you had arrived on time for your interview, you may have gotten that job. Okay? So again, we are describing or looking at or thinking about a situation that didn't happen and trying to imagine what might have happened if that situation had been different. Okay, and I want to look at something in the future for you in the next example. In the next example, whoopsie diddles. In the next example, you can look at third conditional in your current life. So imagine that the third conditional can also be used to describe an imagined change in your current life. This form uses would, could, may, or might with the base form of the verb. Okay, so imagine you have all immigrated to Canada, but if you had not immigrated to Canada, your life would be very different now, or it could be very different now, or it might be very different now, or it may be very different now. If you had not immigrated to Canada, but you did immigrate to Canada and you are living here, so your life is the way it is now. But if you had not moved, if you had not come here, your life would be, could be, might be, or may be very different now. Here's another example. If you had divorced your spouse last year, you would be free to marry anyone you wanted to right now. But luckily, you did not divorce your spouse last year. You're still very happily married, and so you don't have to worry about marrying someone else right now. Okay, so you're imagining a situation that is different from what actually happened. That's what we use the third conditional for. You're imagining a situation that didn't happen and what might have happened if something had been different. So, just to review, you're looking at past perfect in the if clause and would have or should have or could have in the result clause, and the past participle of the verb or the present, the base form of the verb. So that's the story on conditionals.